So, who here has ever been excluded? Stand up. So many of us. And what about those who've also excluded someone else? There's some people standing up and sitting down there. It's okay, we've all fallen foul of doing that, so thank you very much for being bold and sharing that. And did you know that even in adulthood, being excluded is the same as feeling physical pain? So many thanks for your questions today. There was many of you that wanted to know how to attract diverse talent. You also wanted to know how to make diversity and inclusion come alive rather than just playing lip service to it. And also how to really embed diversity and inclusion through your talent acquisition process. So through our conversation today, I really hope by the end of it, you will know how companies can make diversity, inclusion and belonging, that's something that I like to speak about and that I've used DIB as, central to the business success. And I really hope that you can feel as passionate as I do about being a diversity and inclusion change maker yourselves, because I really believe that we can all take small steps to creating an environment of belonging. And I also hope that you'll want to challenge your own thinking and the thinking of others around you in the future to be a cultural architect and a change maker. So I thought I'd start with a bit of a story about where I think now, looking back, my journey began. And I do feel a bit strange about sharing this story because there was certainly a time where I definitely wanted to keep this hidden. But if I ask you, who do you think the picture on the right is there? Dumbo. And what about the picture on the left? Who was also called Dumbo at school. So when I was born, I had very big ears which stuck out. That's the only photo that I could find, and I know that it doesn't look half as bad as I remember, probably because we didn't have many pictures taken at that time. But I remember being very excluded from my friends in the playground and feeling really lonely and being teased and being called Dumbo consistently. And I think even once a teacher laughingly, and I'm sure just making a bit of a joke, said, "Hey Dumbo," over there. And that feeling of alienation and being excluded stayed with me for a very long time. And I really tried to hide that difference. When I was about 9, I was fortunate enough that my mum had taken me to every doctor to try and see what we could do and if hairbands would keep my ears back. But eventually I had an operation and my parents paid for me to have my ears pinned back. So that was me hiding my difference at that age. And now if I move on to the picture here, who's the picture on the right? Dumbo. And Dumbo is about to be released on Walt Disney Films next year. And I'm really, really hoping that that sends a message to anyone out there that doesn't want to hide their difference any longer. And the picture on the left is myself, finally coming to an age, and I wish I could give everyone the gift of this, where I don't want to hide my own difference, and I absolutely want to include the difference of others and make sure no one ever feels excluded. And I celebrate difference, and I really try to make sure that others celebrate difference as well and feel that that's critical and that I feel well qualified to try and do that, having been through the experience myself. So I also thought I'd share a story of Rolls-Royce from the past and to the present. And these are pictures that I managed to find on the internet in terms of our brand of old. And I just ask you to consider, during this time, who do you think was included and excluded in our organisation? Who belonged and who didn't belong? What was the impact at that time? What was the appropriate behaviour and what was the leadership shadow? And certainly in terms of your role, who was allowing this to happen at that time? And we have to remember that this is of times gone by, and we were in a different world then, and there was different cultures. Fast forward to 2017 and 2018, and I am incredibly proud to have been part of the journey of Rolls-Royce, where when I began in the role of diversity and inclusion, global consultant for diversity and inclusion, 6 years ago, there was absolutely no way that anybody could come out as gay. It was very hidden. The LGBT community were very hidden. And I remember people speaking to me saying, there isn't any gays in Rolls-Royce, and people feeling afraid to speak up. And we didn't have such a culture of psychological safety that we do today. But step by step, we have managed to rock the Rolls-Royce brand, which has been very blue in the past. And this picture on the left here shows celebrations of Ida Hobbit. And I'm pleased to have my colleague Sarah Bell here with me today, who's been instrumental in the area of Birmingham where this sign was shown, with her leader Warwick Matthews, who about 4 years ago didn't know much about diversity and inclusion, but was brave enough to share his story and his personal story and become an ambassador for change. And at that time, he wasn't as senior as he is now. And lo and behold, a few years later, he's managing to sponsor the LGBT communities and make changes like this and celebrating Ida Hobbit. So one step at a time, we have managed to create a culture which now we work with Airbus, Virgin, Qantas. We partner with our customers and suppliers, which is instrumental to our success and showing that we have an inclusive environment and therefore attract diverse talent. So what I see has worked best in my time, we've tried many, many approaches, but the inside-out approach to creating an inclusive environment is the initiative or the program or the piece which I have seen accelerate us the most. And so therefore, my equation, because all engineers love equations, is inclusion and belonging. If you concentrate on that, the inside out at the macro level, you will get diversity. And that also goes for the micro level in terms of ourselves and our own open mindset. So it's really, really important for diversity, inclusion and belonging to be seen as something that we're all accountable for, because otherwise it becomes very theoretical and people think it's someone else's job. And I've certainly been in that role in Rolls-Royce where if you're in a central role, everyone thinks, oh, it's Natalie and her colleague Heather who are responsible for diversity and inclusion. But one by one, we've managed to get ambassadors like Sarah and Warwick and other change makers, and step by step, starting small, proving successes and telling those stories, ensure that we've managed to get to where we are today. I'm sure that there's some people here that love stats. I've learnt my lesson well at Rolls-Royce because I'm very right-brained, so I love the pictures, but I wanted to make sure that I cater for all behavioural styles here. So for anyone that likes stats, and some of these are phenomenal. I mean, what I can't believe is that people will resist a pay increase of up to 34%, so they will stay with a company instead of leave for a higher pay if that company is inclusive. So as recruiters, I think that's a massive, massive selling point for you. Because if you can attract a candidate to another culture where they feel included and that they can belong despite their difference, then that's fantastic. That will help you get the best talent. And another piece which I found very interesting, which may be relevant for you, is that if you try different approaches, so this 100% accuracy rate for where people are recruited via different approaches, Well, again, how many people could you be sifting out if you only use one approach? So there's many stats here, and I'm very happy to share more with you if you'd like. I love this quote on the top, and I'm seeing diversity, inclusion and belonging mainly come out more and more. So the diversity awards of old have just rebranded as the inclusion awards. So everyone is jumping onto the best practice and the forward-thinking area of belonging now. And it used to be diversity is invited to the party, inclusion is like being asked to dance. But how fantastic that belonging is dancing like no one's watching. And for those of you that watched the World Cup recently, if you think about how Gareth Southgate led his team, he led it from an attitude of belonging and an approach which was very, very different. So despite us not getting through to the final, my little boy cried for a full half an hour, the team have come home winning because of how they were. And in the future, I really see that that will be different for sport going forward. The second quote here is the commitment from our CEO, Warren East, which is absolutely fantastic. And we have launched this year a new vision with new behaviours and new values, which I'll share in a moment. But Warren and our senior leadership team have declared their commitment to creating an environment where we can be our best. And so how do you do this? And whilst I'm not specifically getting into the detail of our diversity and inclusion strategy, what I have seen is when you hook it to the company strategy, that is critical. It isn't then something in a silo. So I made sure that our values were absolutely hooked into the company values. And I'm very pleased to say that now all leaders have to sign up to the value of care and creating an environment where everybody can be their best. And pursuing collaboration is a behaviour that will then help that value come alive. And we now have leaders which are recruited, retained, promoted, recognised and rewarded by casting their leadership shadow. And if I go back to the example of Warwick Matthews, where some time ago he wasn't as senior as he is now, but how he has led, he is now on our Global Diversity and Inclusion Council, and he is seen as one of the most inclusive leaders. And guess what? Everybody wants to work for him. I'm not going to go through all of these points, but I did want to share some of our methods and our initiatives. So what do you do? And those highlighted a couple where I am going to dive into for you, a couple of case studies. But all of these things, it's been a multi-pronged attack in order to get to where we are today and to shift that ship, to steer in the right direction, to get diversity and inclusion on the agenda, where all leaders have it as part of their KPIs. The businesses are now accountable. We have clear metrics and targets that we work towards. And it's absolutely critical that everybody realises the importance of inclusion and getting diversity within their team. So managers have just been trained to make sure that every time they make a decision, they're looking for where the difference is in that conversation. But some of the things that we've done are rolling out a high-performance culture programme, which I'm going to share some of with you, making sure that we've got the business case and the sense of purpose, and hooking that to the business objectives. Top-down commitment from leadership is absolutely critical. Collaborating and partnering and trying some things in pilots and taking small steps, so chunking off that big elephant has been really, really helpful. Most recently, I've created a framework which makes sure that we look for inclusion through all of our processes and policies, and we address institutional barriers by working with those process and policy owners to address at each step of the way, where is the adverse impact? Where do we have bias in this process or policy? The collecting starfish at the end here, I do some mindfulness every day, and there was one mindfulness program which talked about a lady that saw many, many starfish washed up on the beach. And a man came down and saw her one by one throwing those starfish back into the ocean and went up to her and said, "How are you ever going to clear up this beach? It's going to take too long." And she said, "I just need to do it one at a time." And that's what I've noticed. One step at a time, some incremental nudges, trying different things has got us where we are today. It's not going to, culture change doesn't happen overnight. It's taken years and it will take years, and you need that commitment, that resilience, that longevity and sustained change in order to make it stick. I'm just going to take a little bit of water. I promise it's not gin and tonic in there. So the couple of examples that I'd like to share with you are our high performance culture program and applying the global diversity and inclusion principles to the framework that I talked about, but in particular, the recruitment process. So we're very proud at Rolls-Royce to talk about our high performance culture program. And this was a program that 55,000 people over 55 territories have gone through. So a huge commitment to the company. But what it enabled us to do was to create a language, a consistent language for psychological safety and for people to understand what we were talking about. What it is a series of, there's 20 concepts here, and there's 6 that I'm just going to highlight that really play to the diversity and inclusion piece. So we hooked onto this program in order to be able to speak in the language of everybody else for diversity and inclusion. And they're very simple behavioural concepts. But what happened is that our leaders were champions of this and actually facilitated the teams that went through it. And so they became change makers. And everybody that's gone through it now will be in a meeting and then say, "Oh, be careful of your filters," or "What is your leadership shadow?" So some very simple behavioural concepts which allowed everyone a level playing field to have open discussions on. So filters, that's really unconscious bias, so be careful of your filters. Be curious, that's a really positive way to make sure that we're open-minded. Watch your leadership shadow. We've been able to use that in recruitment to make sure that our leaders are casting an inclusive leadership shadow. I'm just going to very briefly touch on now a piece around the framework which I spoke about, which directly relates to recruitment. So this has been a program which has been running for a couple of years now. But what it has done is assess our overall talent acquisition and recruitment processes globally and made sure that we made some changes through that to make it more inclusive and attract diverse candidates. So one example is that the contract we had with our external partner for recruitment has been in place for many years, but until most recently, there was nothing in that about attracting diverse candidates. So we have rewritten that rule book. We've also created principles which all recruiters and managers have to adhere to. Through the recent restructure, we have made sure that all managers go through a Recruit the Best training program, and I've personally led some of the more deep dive WebExes of how managers can be more inclusive. One of the other principles that is attached to this process is to making sure that we come from a place of yes on flexible working. So all our adverts are open to discussions for flexibility. So in summary, and I can't believe I've got to the 20 minutes, so I'm right on time. The way to attract diversity is through inclusion and belonging. I believe that we need an inside-out approach, that's your mindset, and at the macro level. Diversity, inclusion, and belonging starts with each of us, and there are practical steps that we can all take to address institutional barriers along the way. And so this is the question I would like to leave you with now to discuss and to discuss with me. But I would also like for us to think about what action can each of us individually take and also take with our organisations to drive forward some of the pieces that I've spoken about today. So thank you very much for listening.